please enjoy this ad-free episode as part of our Academic Integrity series sponsored by Pangram Labs, the world's leading AI detection tool. Try it out at pangram.com. That's pangram.com.
Welcome back, everybody. It's your time to Ed Up on the Ed Up Experience podcast, where we make education your business. This is Elvin Freitas, co-founder of the Ed Up Experience, and we are back on another episode of our awesome Academic Integrity podcast series. And with me along the ride is always the co-host with the most, Bradley Emmy, CTO and co-founder of Pangram Labs. Bradley, how you doing?
I'm doing really well, Elvin. How about you?
I'm doing fantastic. You know me, ready to rock and roll. Let's bring in our guest. She is Dr. Sharon Hoppus. No, I got it wrong.
No, you did. You did it just right. Yeah.
Hoppus, thank you. She is Chief Academic Officer of the Community Solution Education System. Sharon, how you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm very excited to be here with you guys today.
Well, we're happy to have you. Thanks so much for being here. We like to jump right on in. So the first question we like to ask everyone is, tell us about what you do and how do you do it?
Sure. So my title, Chief Academic Officer, you mentioned. I am with the Community Solution Education System, have been in this role since November of 2024. So kind of new to the role, but definitely lots of experience in higher ed. I tell folks I've been at small private institutions for most of my career where you kind of do it all. So I always say that I've done everything now except be a president and a bursar. And I know just enough about financial aid to be really dangerous. So we want to stay away from that topic. But the last 10 years, I've actually worked in this space as either in an OPM or in a consulting services capacity. So have spent a lot of time talking about that intersection of kind of market feasibility, program design, program viability, and enrollment management with partners across the US. So lots of experience in that regard too. At the Community Solution, I have the best job. I always laugh and say I'm the only CAO in the country with no faculty and no programs, because all of those things really belong at our 6 colleges and universities throughout the system. And my role is really to provide support, insight, infrastructure, all of the things to help them be successful. So as provost and VPAAs at each of our institutions are doing their work that you would expect to happen directly on a college and university, I, as I like to say, am the backup singer to make sure that they've got all the tools they need and to do the work that needs to be done. So it's been an honor. The last 7 months have been a whirlwind, but it's probably been the best job I've ever had. So
that's fantastic. Let's hear that backup voice. Can we hear? No, I'm just kidding. That's good. So thanks for setting that context. We appreciate that. So we asked everyone this question as well, and you can take it as how you define it personally or how do you define it as part of the institution. How do you define academic integrity?
For me, it's about representing honesty in a student's work. And by that, I mean that it is truly creating a space for them to have work product, input, whatever that might look like, in a way that demonstrates learning and mastery of the content and the discipline, but to do so in a way that is honest to themselves and to the broader academy, which sounds very esoteric and all of that. But I think at the end of the day, academic integrity, it's the responsibility of faculty and the institutions to create space for students to be able to deliver their work in a very authentic and honest way. And that's where the best work happens. And to me, that's what integrity in academic work really is about.
Yeah, that's a great answer. So I guess digging into that a little bit more. So when you say it's on the faculty and the community to kind of uphold it, what are kind of the concrete things that they have to do in order to make sure that actually happens?
I think that there is a purposeful and intentional way to approach teaching and learning that when it comes time for students to demonstrate their knowledge within a particular subject, it's our responsibility to create the space for them to really deliver what they've learned. And I think when we do back of the napkin assessment, do these quizzes every week, answer 10 questions, regurgitate knowledge back to me, right? Those kinds of things are for students, it becomes busy work and less meaningful. And the result of that is that under all of the pressure that they're under to perform, that we're often going to see students cheating in that space. Or if our instructions around how to take in content, to understand content, and then to demonstrate knowledge of that content are developed in such a way that students don't understand it, don't have an ability to kind of transfer that knowledge into their own performance, that's on us as faculty to not create that space. And so that's really where I think creating academic integrity starts within the academy and starts within academic affairs.
That's so interesting that you use the word busy work, because it's like, like nobody wants to do busy work. Like, I don't want to do busy work. Like, you don't want to do busy work.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of interesting that you kind of link that to academic integrity. Like, what do you think that, like, so you believe that a part of academic integrity is that assessment has to be meaningful, like in contrast to busy work?
Yes. Yeah. I think it's got to be really thoughtfully developed that allows the student to tease out the most important aspects of what you need them to learn, right? We spend a lot of time thinking about what learning outcomes for a course should be and what a program should be. Whatever assessments we're doing along the way, whether they're formative, kind of checking in to see how learning is happening, or summative, where we're kind of saying, now integrate all of this for me in a way that has meaning. I think all of that has to be done very intentionally and thoughtfully. So it has meaning for the students. And so it's not, let's run it through the automatic grader and see what runs up. Like we want it to have that substance and meaning to it, to be really valuable.
Definitely. And I think, yeah, I mean, we talk about AI a lot on this podcast, obviously.
Absolutely.
Everyone does. But yeah, I mean, I think one of the promises of AI is that it can help kind of separate out like kind of busy work from meaningful work that actually supports learning objectives. So do you think there is a way that like AI can be kind of integrated into assessments, and like kind of how do you prevent like, the student from just use, because we want the student to just use AI for their busy work. We don't want them using AI to substitute for them where they have a chance to demonstrate their mastery. So like kind of like how are you kind of working with your schools to kind of like draw those lines potentially?
Yeah, so there's a number of conversations that we're having. I think for me, AI brings a new dawn of a focus on two key aspects of learning, and that's critical thinking and information literacy, right? So if I'm building an assignment that students, the AI would be absolutely appropriate for them to use for the final product, I'm going to want to see what was your critical thinking process? How did you work with ChatGPT or with Claude? Like, what was your process of questioning the responses that AI gave back to you as a way to fully develop your thoughts and your goal in the final product?
Oh, interesting. So do you have them like actually like request the logs from these AI tools and turn them in?
I think that's evolving to be best practice. Now, I have to admit, in this moment, I'm not in the classroom, but that's where, as I provide support and counsel to academic leadership on my partner schools, that's the kind of stuff that we're talking about, is like, how do we both encourage our students to understand and use AI appropriately? Because the reality of it is, regardless of the discipline, there is not a discipline that will be untouched in the workplace by AI. So then how do we have it be a meaningful learning experience for them? And so as I'm assessing learning, that's going to be part of what I want to see. I think the other piece that I want to see is directly around information literacy, because we went from really messy, really sloppy sound citations in early ChatGPT that they're better now. But in some cases, the better part is that they're actually using real names of journals or titles of articles that would be more passable. But the reality of it is that in some cases that stuff just doesn't exist. AI has kind of mishmashed a couple of collections of things and then presented it as, there's a citation for the idea that I just presented you. And so we want information literacy for students to really think about, let's do a double check, right? Is our AI work really going to stand up to what's so important in educational learning and educational writing? And that is attribution of other people's thoughts and ideas. It would be like, you don't want to encourage somebody to go to Target and steal bath towels because it's a product and there's stuff and you're really literally stealing. Well, if you're not giving attribution to other people's work in an appropriate way, I liken that to stealing towels from Target, right? So we want all of that to be part of the learning as well.
Oh, for sure. But in a way, like it's a little bit in contrast to kind of what AI does. Like AI is kind of an unattributed plagiarism machine in a way. Like AI is taking like all of these, scholarly works and, LibGen 3, like, all of these stolen books and kind of reproducing them without attribution, right?
Yeah.
And so like is there even a role for AI? Like how do you kind of how do you kind of teach your faculty how to kind of grapple with that? Like the fact that like there is going to be a lot of unattributed plagiarism if you don't if you're using AI at all.
I think that's what all of us are grappling with right now, right?
Yeah, totally.
I don't think that there is an easy or right answer. And that's why we're seeing the full kind of extremes of the spectrum. It's the faculty who say, you cannot use AI at all, period, exclamation point, stop, right? Or just don't ask, don't tell, right? I'm going to stick my head in the sand that people are using this, and then I'm just going to pretend like it's not happening. And I think really sorting through some of this is going to be what comes next around our academic integrity policies. And I think to that point, like what I've said to our colleges and university leadership is have policies, have agreements amongst your faculty about how AI is appropriately used within your discipline and within the levels of academic learning, and be clear on that, but be consistent. I think sometimes the academy hides in this, oh, this is academic freedom. We're going to let all the faculty make their own decision, right? Which might feel good for the faculty in the moment. But the reality of it is, think about it. If you're a student and you're in class A that allows AI, but you're also in class B and the faculty said absolutely no, and you're in class C and the faculty was absent on it, like for a student, that's like mind exploding. And it also, those kinds of circumstances are what, in my mind, push students to cheat. Right? When you've created such chaos for them around learning, then it's like, I'm out. I just got to get through this. And that's where we see cheating happen.
Interesting. Yeah. It reminds me a lot of these conversations that happened when I was in school around Wikipedia. Like there was a whole like outrage about Wikipedia. Like we were like, oh, this, anyone can edit Wikipedia. And so the source can be unreliable. You can't attribute it to scholarly sources. So you can't really cite it. Like I remember in high school, like my teachers were telling me, you can't use Wikipedia as a source.
Right.
And now we're kind of seeing a similar conversation get replayed around ChatGPT, where it's like, oh, you can't trust anything ChatGPT says. Like you always have to double check with the primary sources.
Yeah.
But the fact is, it's right most of the time, and
absolutely, yeah.
And sometimes that's good enough.
Yeah, and I do think too that it's a great way to have a starting point. Like, so that whole Wikipedia thing was going on when I was a doctoral student, right? And so that was like, do not ever cite blah blah blah. Well, don't think I didn't use it, but I used it as a starting place, right? Because in many cases, there's great citations at the bottom that take you back to that original peer-reviewed work, or it begins to lay the breadcrumbs to get to what that seminal truth is. And so I don't want to go out and dig that up myself. It's just like, when you're writing a dissertation, one of the best sources for additional information for your lit review, fun fact, go to other dissertations in like disciplines and start with their bibliography, because somebody else has already done that work and you might be able to find a foundation. It creates the foundation to let you do your best work instead of hunting and pecking for little niblets of seminal truth. So,
oh, totally.
Yeah.
And now we have things too, like perplexity.com, u.com, all of these things that actually do actually kind of like reliably kind of check the source for you. And, it may not be a good source. And there's still capability for the LLM to misinterpret the source, of course. But, these are just going to be tools in the scholarly world that are going to be used moving forward. And so to outright ban it just seems a little bit like kind of swimming against the current.
Absolutely. Talk about an ostrich with their head in the sand. That would be that.
One of the things that I want to touch on is the fact that you're in a system. And this is the first time we're talking to someone who's in a system. You have 6 different schools. So talk to us about how that works. Is each school setting their own academic integrity policy? You mentioned that. And do you set it for each school? I know you've been there since November. So how does that work? And what is the policy? Since you have a system, talk to us about all that.
Yeah. So my philosophy as the CAO within the system is I have a deep and abiding respect for faculty governance and for the mission of each of the institutions, which are distinctly different and yet thematically share some broad ideas, social justice, community health, those kinds of things, right? But at the end of the day, a Saybrook University is distinctly different from the Chicago School, different from the University of Western States. So we want to respect that. And those who know it best are those that are part of the governance structure within those institutions. So I see my role as being one of two things. It is honoring and facilitating those conversations at each of our colleges and universities, but then creating a pathway, because I talk to all of them, a pathway for them to share ideas and to come together and connect. So like one of the things we just got back from doing this week is we've put together what we're calling the Academic Administrators Fellowship Academy. So academic leaders from each of our 6 campuses have come together. We're doing a 9-month program. The kickoff and the wrap-up celebration are both in person, but everything in between is asynchronous. But it's an opportunity to really learn about higher education more broadly, right? We often see faculty move into leadership positions without a whole lot of training. So this emerged out of that. But it really, at the end of the day, is facilitating a network of like-minded individuals who are dealing with similar concerns, situations, opportunities, and bringing them together to problem solve. And so we're doing the same thing around academic integrity generally, and specifically as it relates to AI. So as you can imagine, we have some institutions that are further along than others in this process. And so we will continue to have conversations about how to really help each of them define what is right within their own institutions, knowing that this is a must. Like you can't opt out of having something with AI.
Go ahead, Bradley.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I mean, so when you say you kind of bring people together to collaborate, like kind of who are the collaborators in this space?
Well, we've got a couple layers of it. So I work most directly with the chief academic officers at each of the 6 institutions. In the case of the Fellowship Academy, these really are program directors, chairs, and academic deans that are coming together for these conversations. As a matter of fact, Dr. Horowitz and I, so you all have met him, our chancellor, we had a conversation this morning about it's probably time for us to think about an AI teaching and learning task force. We've got some members of our various boards of trustees across the system who have an interest, who have expertise. We have internal expertise, and then we have a network of professional experts that we want to bring together to really help us think about where do we make the right investments and how do we really position all of our colleges and universities within this world of AI, how we're going to leverage it, how we're going to make the most sense of it, and how we're going to help students understand its value and importance as they transform themselves to be ready for professional careers.
Interesting. And would that kind of center be kind of shared across all 6 universities as well?
It shared under my leadership. Yeah, that's kind of the vision for it. So yeah, it's exciting. This is really a great time.
Very much. And when you say some schools are kind of further along in the AI and academic integrity than others, like kind of what do you mean by that? Like what does further along kind of look like?
Well, and it's interesting, right? Because we use AI broadly to kind of include everything that's not traditional online or traditional classroom learning. It's all kind of getting in that AI bucket, right? So we've got a doctor of chiropractic, and we have a college of osteopathic medicine, soon to open a second within our system. Those programs in particular are exceptionally advanced in the use of simulations and in the use of truly what I would consider AI learning, with the ability to interact, to be in a patient room or in an emergency room and have simulations that get them responding to, all of a sudden blood pressure's dropped, or all of a sudden, right, those kinds of things. So we've got that on one end of the spectrum. We also are running a pilot at Pacific Oaks which is our institution focused in early childhood education and K-12 education, then they're doing some really great things. They just finished up a pilot using virtual reality to simulate classroom interactions for their students. And now we're looking at taking it back even more practically using VR around a biological science general education program. And so we're really trying to understand at this point more strategically than let's try this here. Let's see who our early adapters are. It really is time for all of us to kind of be all in, which is why this task force, I think, is going to be such a great effort.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And so kind of it's a way of kind of like, okay, like what are all the different creative ways that we could use AI to kind of assist us in learning?
Yeah. And I think with that, regardless of the technology, and as we begin to explore this at every juncture, this question of how do we make sure that there is academic integrity around what our expectations are from students and the work that students are presenting back to us, right? So that question never leaves us, even in these moments of innovation.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I think the word I keep hearing everyone say about this is like cognitive offloading. It's like I need to make sure that my students are only offloading the stuff that isn't important. And if they're offloading the stuff that is important, then that's when we have a problem.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's that, right? I mean, this will age me, but right, I grew up in the whole kind of here are your facts that you need to know your dates, know your these things, right? And while their context is important, those aren't the things that stick with me today, all these years later. And then even when I was an undergrad and in graduate school, it was a very different approach, kind of that sage on the stage, right? That's how we learn. And that's what's fascinating as faculty members. Most of us have come up through that educational process. And so it's really important for us to understand now in this age of technology assisted learning, what we knew as our examples don't exist anymore. So then where do we go to learn to help our students learn? And that's really the kind of space that we're trying to create across the system in a variety of different ways for this.
Oh, definitely. And like, I mean, I do think like AI is definitely like kind of like reducing our need to learn kind of how to memorize things, just like memorize a large volume of facts. But at the same time, like, you know, if I'm in an ambulance and my doctor's performing CPR on me, I don't want them to have to go to the internet and look up how to do CPR before like while I'm dying.
That GPT, that's right. Yeah, yeah. No,
So
I
it
agree
does
with
seem
you.
still very kind of discipline dependent, like how much offloading we can do to machines versus how much we actually still need to just memorize and intake and
Yeah.
just have the fundamental like foundation that we need in order to be successful professionals in our fields.
Yeah. Well, and I do like, let's go back to your CPR example.
Yeah, totally.
So there's so much around medical education that it truly is about rote memorization.
Yep.
And then eventually you get to apply it, right? So let's say it's not that crisis moment, right? Because you need instinct to act then, right? That is absolutely not an AI chat GPT moment.
Yeah.
But if you are looking at a set of symptoms and really trying to understand a diagnosis for it, rather than having to go back to the books or rely on your memory from med school 5 or 10 years ago, having AI tools to be able to deliver that at your fingertips is absolutely powerful. So if we're not spending our time in classrooms anymore in medical education with that rote memorization, what does that leave space to do? I mean, think about that. What this could be about, oh, I don't know, shockingly enough, patient relationships, how to make connections, how to build trust, how to communicate with families, how to understand the impact of diversity in gender, race, ethnicity, like all of the things and what that means for patient care. Those are absolutely valuable things that need to be learned and discussed as part of medical education, but there hasn't been quite enough space for all of that. It's gotten better, but if we're moving away from that memorization, the sky's the limit on what medical education could and should look like. All my
Totally.
opinion, of course.
No, I completely agree with that. And I think like, you know, there's all this talk and discourse about like, oh, you know, AI is going to automate so much labor. But in actuality, like I think what the future is going to look like is AI is like really amazing at some things. And humans are also amazing at other things that AIs are really not great at. And so it's kind of more just, you know, maybe what things look like in the future is just humans figure out, okay, like what is the AI really good at? And I don't need to focus on that versus like, can I redirect all of my attention to the parts that are much more kind of like sticky and fluid and like things that AIs AIs are, for instance, like great at retrieval, but humans are so much better at empathy and synthesis and like kind of like understanding the nuances of things in ways that machines can't. And so, yeah, I definitely see a lot of education in the future kind of shifting towards like, how can we work with AI versus like, how can AI replace, the labor that we do? Like, I would love to see more people talking about that.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Because I think that's, if we can move the conversation that direction and move development that direction, that we become companions to success with one another, I think that's where the scary part comes out of it. Because I don't have to worry about being replaced by some AI chief academic officer, but I sure could use that support to kind of in the moment or as I'm researching something to help me be a better CAO more broadly. So yeah, no, I agree completely.
Yeah,
sure.
I want to jump in real quick. So I have a question. Talk to us about the ethics. Is there like an honor code? Do the students sign something? They didn't say, "Hey, I'm gonna try to my best to give my work and be have full integrity on it." Is there? Talk to us about that. Is there something on campus? Is it each school is different, or is it like kind of
I think very much each college and university takes a different approach to that. I think largely we collectively say that as you enroll, you're signing an agreement that says that you will uphold the policies and practices of the institution. So some call it an honor code and become very, very specific around what that means. And it often is a reflection of the mission. I think by and large, the colleges and universities within the community solution, it's very much about kind of, here's where we are, here's what we expect of you. You signed up for this, and by doing so, you're agreeing to it. And so that's very much kind of where that contract, for lack of a better word, resides between the student and the institution.
Yeah, and you know what I always find interesting is that students don't read anything. It just sign off. So you almost want to have like a video series. You have to go through and get a certificate to be like, did you read this content? Do you understand what happened? And it's phenomenal how when they do get caught and something happens, they're like, well, I didn't know that. Well, here's the signature right here.
Yeah, no, and there are definitely some things I think overall within the operations of a college or university that you really do want to have that early sign off for things. I mean, we deal with things like state authorization and licensure. We want students to understand if they start a program in a state where we're authorized to deliver it for online education, and then they choose to move to a different state, we need them to be aware that that means we can't educate them any longer. And there's an impact for that, right? So those are the things that we would be very prescriptive in getting a signature on. But I think largely it's kind of like, welcome to our community. Here's our rules. Not quite an HOA, but we do have some things we need you to follow. So.
And what does the accountability structure look like for that? Like, who kind of enforces the honor code?
Yeah, so I think typically in academic integrity processes, it starts with the faculty. And this is why if you read a lot of the literature, I was reading some things just kind of prepping for today, that they talk about students often have the perception that it's okay to cheat because by and large, faculty don't catch it. Right. And quite frankly, we have tools that we can kind of turn it in or related kind of tools to see if there's been plagiarism, but they have their significant weaknesses as well. And so if that perception is that faculty aren't catching stuff or aren't responding to things, then why not? Right. So that's a problem. But faculty also need the tools to be equipped to deal with those kinds of things. And so when we find out within our system that there's some kind of integrity issue, first identified by faculty members, and then each institution, some driven by accreditation standards and specialized accreditation in particular, kind of have a threshold of, this is a teachable moment, you've now crossed the line and we're going to dismiss you from the program. And maybe there's an F grade in the course in between or something like that. But that's really kind of the progress of that. Ultimately, in any kind of complaint or compliance issue, there is a progression of seriousness, right? So there's a degree of authority that rests with the faculty member. Usually it goes either to the chief academic officer or the student affairs lead within the institution, depending on what the judicial process is, and then, can land on the president's desk and, heaven forbid, in legal if it gets that far. But yeah.
Interesting. I've actually never heard of or I think you're the first person to mention to us that the accreditation institution actually plays a role in kind of shaping the actual kind of decisions that end up coming to light. Like, what are those rules that the accreditation industry or that the accreditors have?
It really depends on the discipline and the licensure body, right? So the American Bar Association, California Bar Association, which we're part of the CBA for our law school in California, they each have very specific kind of standards of integrity and ethics. And so those trickle into how we do classroom management and expectations from the students, right? Because if someone's not going to have integrity in submitting work within their classroom, likely is they're not going to pass the integrity standard to be licensed by either bar organization, which means they can't be an attorney, right? So it really kind of varies depending on what licensure expectations are around ethical behavior and integrity, and then that trickles back into the discipline for their curriculum.
Yeah. And when you talk about like kind of teachable moment versus kind of like gone beyond kind of the point of repair, like how do you kind of advise your member schools to kind of like on where to draw that line?
A lot of it depends on what the severity of it is. And I think being sensitive to the student and the student's experience. So for example, I many years ago was at a small private institution in the San Francisco Bay Area. I think close to 20% of our students were international students, many of them from the Pacific Rim. And students, particularly coming out of China, have a different understanding of what it means to attribute others' work and to do citation. It's a very different approach than what the American educational system is. So if I'm going to have a student that's new to an American graduate degree, for example, that doesn't exactly know the specific ways to use APA citations or how to move from a direct quotation, which is a very specific way to kind of put something in work, versus the idea of kind of capturing thoughts from others and citing those, that's a new world for them, right? So as I see that happen in coursework, I want to be sensitive to it and use that as a teachable moment. Make sure that they understand that there's a writing center that can help them develop those skills. Make sure that they have an opportunity to kind of have the light bulb go on and do the work appropriately, which is very, very different for me than someone who outright buys a paper on Chegg or something like that and tries to submit that. And lo and behold, it was from another graduate student I had 3 terms ago, right? So 2 very, very different scenarios. That to me, that would be the difference between that teachable moment and you just got an F for the course. So
a lot of it has to do with intent.
Yeah.
Sharon, this has been a fantastic conversation. Thank you so much. I'm going to ask Bradley if he has one last question, and I'll give you my last question.
Yeah, actually, I'm kind of curious to kind of bring it back a little bit to the beginning of the conversation where we asked kind of what does academic integrity mean to you? And you mentioned that it often falls a lot on the faculty really to, uphold academic integrity, right? And so, in some of these student cases, like when these student cheating cases come in, does the committees or whatever ever consider the faculty potentially having responsibility even? Like they're like, okay, as a faculty, you made it too easy to cheat on this, and so we're just going to drop the case.
Interesting.
I don't know that I've ever seen that circumstance before, but I think much like with our students in teachable moments, I think there are often many times opportunities for professional development for faculty, and particularly for new faculty that are just coming into their roles, because again, there's not a boot camp someplace that is teaching faculty in the hard sciences or in social sciences how to then be a faculty member. We know how to teach by our own experiences, right? So if I, as a department chair, for example, am seeing a faculty member kind of struggling with this issue, or we're having a conversation about their syllabus and what might be happening in the classroom, that's a great time for me to have that teachable moment with them for professional development. Just say, hey, what if we thought about this assessment? I think the other group that often doesn't get enough credit in this conversation are instructional design teams that are found on campuses everywhere. And these are individuals who are trained to really create content in a way. They're not going to be the discipline subject matter expert, but they're going to be the way to deliver that content that's most meaningful to the student and to create assessments that have integrity, that really drive to that intentional learning. And so engaging them in your processes and creating course content and delivery is really important too.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what's interesting is that instructional designer, when I was coming up, that wasn't even a thing. It's amazing how quickly it's moved and now how they're just everywhere, and they're so needed too, you know. They've been needed for such a long time, so it's great. So, all right, down to our last question. We're asking everyone the same question. Sharon, what do you see as the future of academic integrity?
So the one I think that makes me the most anxious about is actually less about student work and academic integrity for students and more about what happens with academic leaders as they move forward in their own work and their own writing. In this world of AI, right? So we know, I probably can tell you about 10 presidents in the course of my career who have lost their jobs because someone has pointed to them for plagiarism in their work. That is going to become a thing, right? As more and more of this. So my dissertation sits in ProQuest, and I might write an article that all of a sudden bounces up to somebody because they ran it through Turnitin, and now this plagiarism thing is a really icky letter that I have to wear, right? Kind of like the scarlet letter of academics. And so I worry for that world. I don't know what the answer for that is, but I think it's something that we need to be thoughtful about as more and more of this happens, as AI evolves within academic work. And as there is, just like you said, Bradley, more of a kind of mishmash of all of this research and thought and writing and less directly attributable work. And what does that mean for future careers? So that's the piece for me that I don't have an answer for in terms of the future, but I worry about.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. And think about the Harvard president that just happened to. So that's a perfect example right there. So this has been fantastic. Thank you so much. I just want to outro my co-host with the most, Bradley Emmy, CTO and co-founder at Pangram Labs. Bradley, thank you as always.
It's always a great time, Alvin. Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. And your guest today, ladies and gentlemen, she is, see if I get this right, Dr. Sharon Hoppus. Yes?
Hoppus.
Chief Academic Officer at the Community Solution Education System. Sharon, thanks for being with us. Thank you so much.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you.
And with that, ladies and gentlemen, you've just ed up.
Thank you for listening. This episode is part of our Academic Integrity series, sponsored by Pangram Labs, the world's leading AI detection technology. Try it out at pangram.com. That's PANGRAM.com.